I never imagined that the people I trusted most, my own parents, would one day ban me from my sister's wedding. But what shocked me even more wasn't just being excluded from the most important day of her life. No, the true betrayal came in the form of an email. Cold, clinical, and devastating. Where my father demanded that I contribute $100,000 to pay for the very wedding I wasn't even invited to. Think about that for a second. Not only was I branded the family troublemaker and shut out of the celebration, but then I was expected to foot half the bill for a lavish $250,000 wedding designed more as a public relations stunt for the groom's crumbling family empire than an actual celebration of love. That moment, staring at the budget spreadsheet attached to my father's email, with imported flowers from the Netherlands, a live band from New York, a Vogue photographer, and a 7-day honeymoon in Europe, felt like a punch to the gut. My parents, people I believed valued honesty, fairness, and family loyalty, were now treating me like an outsider. Worse, like an ATM. The message was blunt. Nathan, we hope you'll contribute $100,000, half the cost, like a decent big brother. After what you did at the family gathering, you should feel lucky to still be involved in contributing to your sister's happy day. Lucky. That word burned into my mind. I was supposed to feel lucky to be excluded from the wedding, accused of ruining my sister's happiness, and then forced to pay a 6-figure sum as some twisted form of penance. It was betrayal layered with humiliation, and it tore at me in ways I didn't even think possible. The irony was bitter. I'd spent months trying to protect my sister Brooke from walking into a marriage with a man I knew was dangerous. A man whose entire life was built on lies and manipulation. But instead of gratitude, I was punished. Instead of being trusted as the older brother who had always been her protector, I was cast out and silenced. And yet, beneath the anger, one truth pulsed through me like a heartbeat. I couldn't just let it go. No matter how much my parents despised me, no matter how much Brooke hated me at that moment, I had a promise to keep. A promise I had made to her when she was just a little girl. That I would never let anyone hurt her. That's why this story isn't just about money or being banned from a wedding. It's about what happens when truth collides with family loyalty, when protecting someone you love means becoming the villain in their eyes. It's about how far I was willing to go to save my sister, even if it meant losing her forever. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, you need to understand who I am. Not just the journalist you may have read about in headlines, not just the brother who stormed into a wedding with a stack of documents, but the person behind all of it. Because only then can you see why I fought so hard, and why being cast as the villain cut so deep. My name is Nathan Scott. I'm 33 years old, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts. On paper, my life looks simple enough. An investigative journalist for the Boston Herald, living in a small apartment in Back Bay with a view of the Charles River. But behind that simple exterior lies a life shaped by two things: a relentless pursuit of truth and an unwavering devotion to family. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. My parents were middle-class civil servants in Portland, Maine. Dad worked in the local tax office, a man who believed in dignity above all else. Mom worked in the city administrative office, always cautious about how the family appeared to neighbors and friends. They were baby boomers who carried the old world mindset. Work hard, save, keep your head down, and life will reward you. Growing up, I was the bookish one. While my friends played video games or chased summer adventures, I buried myself in newspapers and history books. I didn't do it to be different. I did it because I wanted to understand. Why do people lie? Why do those in power get away with things others don't? Why do good people often pay the price for the bad? Those questions gnawed at me from a young age, and journalism became my way of chasing answers. My first big case years ago was investigating a company in Maine dumping toxic waste into the river. I spent months talking to families who'd lost loved ones to cancer, photographing the poisoned water, piecing together records until I exposed the truth. When the article was published, the company was sued, and for the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to protect the vulnerable. It wasn't about prestige or recognition. It was about justice. But justice comes at a cost. Friends distance themselves, afraid of being dragged into controversies. My family worried endlessly that I was poking at hornets' nests. I couldn't escape, and then sometimes being the man who always told the truth meant being the one who ruined dinners, the one who made silence hang in the room. You see, my father valued family reputation more than honesty. I learned that the hard way when, as a teenager, I exposed his small gambling debt at the dinner table. I thought I was helping. He thought I was humiliating him. That clash, truth versus dignity, defined much of my life with my parents. And yet, despite all the tension, I never stopped loving them. I never stopped protecting them. Most of all, I never stopped protecting my younger sister, Brooke. She was 6 years younger than me, the firecracker of the family. Stubborn, emotional, and endlessly full of life. From the time she was little, I made her a promise. No one would hurt her as long as I was around. That promise defined me as much as journalism did. Whether it was chasing down an ex-boyfriend who conned her out of money or comforting her after heartbreak, I was always the shield she could lean on. So when she introduced Nick Harrington, the wealthy heir with the perfect smile, my instincts kicked in, not as a journalist, but as a brother. And when those instincts screamed that something was wrong, I couldn't ignore them. That's who I am. A man who believes truth is worth defending, even when it's inconvenient. A brother who refuses to sit silently while someone he loves walks into danger. And yes, maybe a stubborn soul who can't keep his mouth shut when a lie is staring him in the face. Some call me reckless. Others call me righteous, but I call it this: the only way I know how to live. And when Brooke's happiness was on the line, when her future was tied to a man I knew carried darkness, I couldn't stand by, even if it meant losing everything else. If there's one person who has always been at the center of my life, it's my sister, Brooke. 6 years younger than me, she wasn't just my sibling. She was my shadow, my responsibility, and in many ways, my reason for becoming the man I am today. Growing up in Portland, Maine, meant summers by the water, winters bundled up in the old wooden house, and afternoons spent running through the backyard overlooking Casco Bay. And through all of it, Brooke was there, fiery, stubborn, and unstoppable. She wasn't the type of little sister who played quietly with dolls or waited for someone to lead her. No, Brooke was the one charging into playground fights, standing up for kids twice her size, and daring anyone to tell her no. I'll never forget the day she came home from school with a swollen cheek. She was only 8 years old then, and I was 14. She'd stepped into a fight to defend a disabled classmate who was being teased by an older boy. She got hurt, but she refused to back down. I sat there quietly, my stomach twisting. To everyone else, Nick sounded like a dream come true. But to me, something fell off. His name stuck in my head like an itch I couldn't scratch. Harrington Industries. I was sure I'd skimmed that name in a report or an article at work. I couldn't place it exactly, but my gut told me I needed to dig deeper. The following week, Brooke brought Nick home to meet the family. I drove in from Boston, telling myself to keep an open mind. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he really was everything Brooke said. When I walked into the house, though, it felt more like a stage production than a family dinner. Dad wore a neatly pressed shirt. Mom had her hair styled, and Brooke was radiant in a red dress, standing next to a tall man in a gray suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine ad. "Brother Nathan, this is Nick," Brooke said, practically glowing. Nick extended his hand. His grip was firm, his smile perfectly calibrated. "Nice to meet you. Brooke has told me a lot about you. The famous journalist from Boston, right?" His tone was smooth, but his eyes were cold, sharp, assessing me like I was a problem he needed to figure out. Throughout dinner, Nick held court. He spoke about Harrington Industries, factories in 3 states, expansion into Asia, business trips to London and Tokyo. He gifted my mother an expensive bottle of French wine and my father Cuban cigars. Each gesture timed so perfectly it felt rehearsed. He flattered Brooke with tender looks, squeezing her hand under the table. My parents were captivated. Dad laughed, saying Nick reminded him of his younger self. Mom nearly teared up, already seeing him as the ideal son-in-law. But me, I watched his every move. The way he dodged questions with slick diversions. The way his charm felt more like performance than sincerity. The way his eyes darted whenever money or business risks were mentioned. I couldn't shake the feeling that Nick wasn't introducing himself. He was selling himself, and my family was buying every word. That night, when the dishes were cleared and Brooke floated around in a daze of happiness, I pulled my mother aside. "Don't you think he's a bit too perfect?" I asked quietly. She frowned, brushing me off. "Nathan, you're suspicious again. He's kind. He loves Brooke. Isn't that what matters?" But I couldn't let it go. I drove back to Boston the next morning with Nick's name echoing in my mind. Harrington Industries. Nick Harrington. Something wasn't right. And as a journalist, but more importantly, as a brother, I knew I had to find out what it was. This wasn't just about being protective. This was about survival. Because if I was right, my sister wasn't about to marry Prince Charming. She was walking straight into the arm of a predator. Back in Boston, I couldn't shake Nick Harrington from my mind. His flawless charm, his too polished answers, the way he seemed rehearsed, it all gnawed at me. I'd learned over the years that when something feels too perfect, there's usually a lie buried underneath. And if there's one thing I can't live with, it's letting a lie go unchecked. The first thing I did was run his name through our internal archives at the Boston Herald. Nothing major turned up at first glance, just a few generic business write-ups about Harrington Industries, the family-owned auto parts empire he had bragged about at dinner. On the surface, they looked successful, expanding across 3 states with promises of breaking into international markets. But there was something missing, something I couldn't put my finger on. Picked up the phone and called Charlie, an old colleague from my early days in journalism, who now worked at the New York Times. If there was a financial scandal hiding in the shadows, Charlie would know about it. "Charlie," I said, keeping my voice low, "have you ever come across anything on Harrington Industries?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low chuckle. "Harrington? Oh, Nathan, you've poked a hornet's nest. That company's been drowning in debt for years. Rumors of bankruptcy keep popping up, but they've got enough connections to keep the facade alive. If you're thinking of digging, tread carefully. They don't play nice." My heart sank. Debt, bankruptcy. This wasn't just about a family with a few rough quarters. This was a company on the verge of collapse. And Brooke was falling for their golden boy. Within a week, Charlie sent me a thick packet of documents, old reports, bank filings, and internal whispers that had circulated on Wall Street. Harrington Industries owed more than $30 million to various banks. Investors were fleeing. The whole thing was a house of cards propped up by falsified financials. But one small note in Charlie's email stopped me cold. Nick Harrington himself was accused of sexual harassment in 2019. Case settled quickly. No official verdict. I read the line over and over, my pulse pounding. Sexual harassment. My little sister's dream fiancé had a history of cornering women and silencing them with money. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to. My gut, my training, and my responsibility to Brooke all screamed the same thing. I had to keep digging. I called in a favor with an old source at the Boston courthouse. After a few phone calls and some careful navigating, I got my hands on fragments of the 2019 case file. The details made my blood run cold. The victim, a young employee at Harrington Industries, had accused Nick of cornering her on a business trip, threatening her job if she didn't comply with his advances. Weeks later, she was fired for performance issues. The case never went to trial because the Harringtons settled quietly for a large sum, silencing her with a non-disclosure agreement. I sat in my apartment staring at the victim's statement. Each line felt like a knife twisting deeper. I pictured Brooke, vulnerable and trusting, smiling at Nick like he was her forever. And I imagined her finding herself in that same terrifying position. I couldn't let it happen. I called Brooke immediately. "We need to talk about Nick," I said as soon as she picked up. Her voice was sharp, defensive. "Nathan, stop it. I know you don't like him, but you don't get to ruin this for me. Brooke, listen to me. His family is drowning in debt, and Nick—" I hesitated but forced it out. "Nick has a history. He was accused of harassment. I've read the case." She cut me off, her voice cracking. "You're jealous, aren't you? Because you're alone and you can't stand to see me happy. You always do this, Nathan. You dig until you destroy. Just leave us alone." The line went dead. I sat frozen, phone clutched in my hand, my chest aching. For the first time in my life, Brooke didn't see me as her protector. She saw me as the enemy. I tried calling my parents, hoping they'd at least listen. But Mom sighed, telling me I was overreacting. Dad's words were harsher. "You're paranoid, Nathan. Stop meddling. Let her live her life." It felt like the entire world was closing in on me. But I couldn't stop. Not when I had proof, not when my sister's future was at stake. So I doubled down. I dug deeper. Anonymous sources, leaked internal emails, whispers from old employees. Each piece painted a darker picture. Harrington Industries wasn't just failing, it was actively covering up fraud. And Nick wasn't just a spoiled heir. He was a predator who thought money could erase his sins. The truth was clear now. Nick wasn't a savior. He was a ticking time bomb. And if Brooke married him, she'd be the one to pay the price. I thought the hardest part would be uncovering the truth about Nick Harrington. I was wrong. The hardest part, Bob, as realizing that my own family, the people I love most, refused to believe me. After finding the court records, the financial reports, and the whispers about Harrington Industries, I felt certain that once I showed Brooke and my parents what I'd uncovered, they'd see Nick for who he truly was. They'd understand why I was so relentless, why I couldn't just let this go, but instead, every attempt I made to warn them pushed them further away. It started with Brooke. The more I pressed, the more defensive she became. When I finally told her about the harassment case, she snapped. "You're jealous, Nathan. You can't stand to see me happy. You've always got to find dirt on people. Not everyone's a villain just because you want a story." Her words cut deeper than she knew. This wasn't about a story. It was about her, my baby sister. But to her, my investigation wasn't love. It was sabotage. When I called Mom, hoping she'd talk sense into Brooke, she sighed so heavily it sounded like the weight of my words exhausted her. "Nathan, you're too sensitive. You always look for the worst in people. Nick is good to Brooke. Why can't you just let her have this?" And then Dad. His voice was hard, almost cold. "You're paranoid, son. You think everyone's corrupt because you spend your life digging through scandals. But this is family, not your newsroom. Leave Brooke alone before you ruin her life. And ours." That last part stung. Ours. as if by protecting Brooke, I was betraying them. But the true fracture came during the family gathering in Portland, when Brooke announced that Nick's family had agreed to a 5-star wedding at the Oceanfront Hotel. But that, according to tradition, the bride's family would cover the entire cost. $250,000. The room went silent. My mom's spoon clattered against her plate. Dad's face tightened as he clenched his wine glass. Aunts and uncles shifted uneasily. And then Brooke, with her voice trembling but diederish mind, explained that Nick's family considered it a gift, a way of honoring her by having her family pay. I couldn't stay quiet. I stood up, heart pounding, and said what no one else dared to. This isn't tradition. This is manipulation. Nick's family is drowning in debt and they're exploiting us. Exploiting Brooke. The room erupted. Uncle Frank slammed his fist on the table, accusing me of slander. Aunt Mary shook her head, whispering that I was jealous. Cousins sneered under their breath. Even my parents turned on me. Dad's face burned red as he shouted, "Enough, Nathan! You're destroying this family. If you can't support your sister, then get out." And Brooke, my Brooke, looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said the words that shattered me. "Brother, you're the worst. Why can't you just let me be happy?" I wanted to scream that happiness built on lies always crumbles. I wanted to beg her to trust me like she used to when we were kids. But her eyes, once full of faith in me, now held only anger and betrayal. So I stood there in silence as my family turned away, feeling like I'd become a stranger in my own home. The very people I'd sworn to protect now saw me as the enemy. That night, after the shouting and the tears, I stepped outside into the cold Portland air, my chest heavy with grief. I wasn't just fighting Nick Harrington anymore. I was fighting my entire family. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if keeping my promise to Brooke meant losing her, and everyone else I loved, forever. If being shouted down at the family gathering hadn't been enough, what came next nearly broke me. I thought my parents' anger would cool, that maybe with time they'd come around. Instead, they doubled down and blindsided me in the cruelest way possible. It came in the form of an email from my father. The subject line was simple: wedding costs. I opened it, expecting maybe a schedule or some note about plans I wasn't invited to. What I found instead was a detailed spreadsheet outlining every single expense of the upcoming wedding. The reception at the Oceanfront Hotel alone cost nearly $200,000. Add imported flowers, a live band from New York, a celebrity photographer, and a 7-day honeymoon through Paris, Rome, and Santorini, and the total climbed to over $250,000. At the bottom of the email, in my father's own words, was the demand that left me speechless. "Nathan, we hope you'll contribute $100,000, half the cost, like a decent big brother. After what you did at the family gathering, you should feel lucky to still be involved in contributing to your sister's happy day." Lucky. That word seared into me like fire. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I was being blamed for embarrassing the family. And now, instead of standing with me, my parents expected me to fund half of the spectacle, as if money could erase the fact that I was being cast out. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. I'm a journalist. I don't have a 6-figure bank account lying around for family obligations. I rent a small apartment in Back Bay. My savings are modest, tucked away for emergencies, not extravagance. The idea that I could casually hand over $100,000 was absurd. But even more absurd was the insult embedded in the demand. That my worth to them wasn't as a son or a brother, but as a wallet. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the glowing screen, my hands trembling. Every detail of that spreadsheet screamed vanity. Imported roses, designer linens. A band that cost more than my annual rent. None of it was about Brooke's happiness. It was about the Harringtons. staging the illusion of wealth and prestige while forcing us to bankroll it. And my parents couldn't see it. Or worse, they refused to. For hours I debated whether to call, to shout, to fight back. But I knew how that would go. They would tell me I was selfish. They would accuse me of ruining everything again. They would push me further into the role of villain, so I didn't respond right away. I sat in silence, the demand echoing in my head. $100,000, a price tag for my sister's happiness, or at least the illusion of it. At that moment, the betrayal became more than emotional. It became financial, tangible, undeniable. My parents had chosen Nick and his family's illusion over me. They had chosen appearances over truth, and now they were trying to buy my silence with guilt and obligation. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to pay. Not a dollar, not a cent. If my family wanted to throw away their savings to prop up the Harringtons, that was their choice. But I wouldn't bankroll the lie. Instead, I made a different choice. I picked up my phone and sent a message to the one person who hadn't turned her back on me, Aunt Teresa. Aunt, we need to meet. I won't let this continue. And with that, the fight wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about survival. For Brooke, for me, and for the family I was trying desperately to save, even as they pushed me further away. In the middle of all the chaos, when every word I spoke was twisted into betrayal and every warning I gave was met with anger, one person finally stepped forward, Aunt Teresa. Teresa wasn't like the rest of the family. While my parents had built their lives on modest stability and appearances, she had once thrived on Wall Street, navigating the ruthless world of finance with sharp instincts and an even sharper mind. She was the kind of woman who could read a balance sheet the way I read investigative reports, spotting lies in the numbers long before others did. At the family gathering, while uncles and cousins dismissed me while Brooke's eyes filled with tears and my father shouted me down, Aunt Teresa stayed quiet. She sat at the far end of the table, sipping her coffee, her expression unreadable. But when my phone buzzed later that night, it was her message that lit a spark of hope inside me. Meet me on the porch after dinner. I'll help you. That was the first time in weeks I felt I wasn't completely alone. When I stepped outside into the cool Portland night, she was already waiting, her wool coat wrapped tight, eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Nathan," she said firmly, "I believe you. That Nick boy and his family, they're not clean. I've heard the whispers. Harrington Industries has been circling the drain for years. They're good at hiding it, but I've seen enough in my career to know when numbers are smoke and mirrors." Her words hit me like oxygen after drowning. Finally, someone else saw it. Finally, someone believed me. I told her everything. The debt, the lawsuits, the harassment case, the documents I'd gathered. She listened carefully, nodding, her eyes narrowing with each new detail. When I finished, she placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You're right not to let this go. Brooke is walking into a trap. But you can't win this with emotion alone. You'll need evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. The kind no one, not even your parents, can ignore." I nodded, my chest tight but hopeful. "I have some already, but it's not enough. Not yet." She leaned closer, her voice low. "Then we'll get more. I still have contacts. Lawyers, bankers, people who owe me favors. I'll dig where you can't. Together, we'll find what you need." For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my shoulders shift. I wasn't just a lone voice shouting into the wind anymore. I had an ally. That night, lying awake in my childhood room, I thought about the promise I made to Brooke years ago, after that schoolyard fight. "I won't let anyone hurt you." At the family gathering, it had felt like I was breaking that promise, hurting her more than helping. But with Aunt Teresa by my side, I finally believed I had a chance to keep it, The Harringtons weren't invincible. Their lies could be exposed. And now I wasn't fighting alone. The morning of the wedding felt like walking into the eye of a storm. The oceanfront hotel stood gleaming by the sea, dressed up like a palace for royalty. Rolls-Royces and Bentleys lined the parking lot. Guests in designer gowns and tuxedos poured through the marble lobby, and the air buzzed with chatter and the scent of imported roses. To everyone else, it was the perfect wedding. To me, it was the stage for a lie so massive it threatened to swallow my sister whole. I wasn't invited. In fact, I'd been banned outright. But that didn't stop me. Tucked inside my jacket pocket was a thick envelope. Financial reports, falsified documents, Sarah Mitchell's harassment statement. The evidence Aunt Teresa and I had gathered to expose Nick Harrington once and for all. My hands shook as I adjusted my tie, the same dark green one I'd worn years earlier when I won my first journalism award. Back then, it symbolized victory. Today, it felt like armor. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered above rows of white chairs. A live band played Canon in D, while cameras from local news outlets clicked in the background. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a publicity stunt for the Harringtons. A desperate attempt to polish their collapsing empire by dazzling Portland's elite. And there she was. Brooke, my little sister, radiant in her white gown, tiara glinting under the lights. Her smile was perfect, but her trembling hands betrayed her nerves. Beside her stood Nick. Handsome, confident, every inch the picture of control. His cold eyes swept across the crowd, pausing for just a fraction of a second on me before sliding away. The ceremony began. The master of ceremonies, polished and eloquent, welcomed the guests. Today, we gather to witness the union of two souls, Brooke Scott and Nick Harrington. Applause thundered through the room. My chest tightened. If I stayed silent, Brooke would be trapped in a marriage built on deceit, tied forever to a man whose past was soaked in predation and fraud. But if I spoke, I risked destroying her, humiliating my family and losing her forever. I stood anyway. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the stage. Whispers spread like wildfire. Heads turned. My father's face flushed crimson as he jumped to his feet. "Nathan, what the hell are you doing here?" His voice cracked with rage. My mother grabbed his arm, hissing, "John, don't. Everyone is watching." Brooke's eyes widened, shock flashing to fury. "Brother, no. Please, not today." I climbed onto the stage and handed the envelope to the MC. My voice shook, but I forced it steady. Before this marriage goes forward, everyone needs to know the truth. The MC fumbled through the pages. His face drained a color. This is a report of the Harrington Industries debts. Over $4 million owed to banks. Murmurs rippled across the hall. Guests craned their necks. Phones lit up as people snapped photos of the papers. I motioned to the projector operator, pressing a USB drive into his hand. "Put it up," I said firmly. Hesitant, but cowed by my stare, he obeyed. The massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. Document after document flashed across it. Falsified profit reports, emails between Harrington executives plotting to mislead investors. Sarah Mitchell's signed statement recounting how Nick cornered her during a business trip. Each slide felt like a hammer blow, shattering the illusion Nick had so carefully built. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests gasped, shouted, snapped photos. Reporters surged forward, already calling their editors. Nick stormed toward me, his mask cracking. His voice boomed through the hall. "This is slander! Lies, you sick bastard! You're jealous because your sister chose me over you." His face twisted with rage, veins bulging in his neck. Brooke sobbed at the foot of the stage, mascara running down her cheeks. "Nathan, stop! Why are you doing this? You're ruining everything." Her words sliced through me, sharper than any knife. She didn't see this as saving her. She saw it as betrayal. But I couldn't back down now. I looked Nick dead in the eyes and said, cold and steady, "The truth doesn't need excuses." That's when Mrs. Helen Harrington, Nick's mother, stood up, her voice sharp enough to silence the room. "Enough! The Harrington family will not be humiliated like this. The wedding is canceled. Your family is not worthy of ours." She grabbed Nick by the arm and stormed toward the exit, their entourage following. Cameras flashed furiously. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Harrington, is it true? Are you bankrupt? Were you accused of harassment?" Nick shoved past them, but the headlines were already writing themselves. I stood frozen on the stage as the fallout exploded around me. My father charged forward, jabbing his finger at me. "Are you satisfied, Nathan? You've destroyed us. You've embarrassed this family beyond repair." My mother sobbed, clinging to him, whispering, "John, stop, please." Relatives scrambled to smooth things over, apologizing to stunned guests, blaming me for the fiasco. Aunt Mary hissed that I was jealous, that I lived to stir up trouble. My cousins sneered, and Brooke, she stood in the middle of the chaos, her white dress like a shroud over her broken dreams. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at me. Her voice trembled, but her words struck like a hammer. "Brother, you're the worst thing that ever happened to me." The room spun. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to explain that I did this because I loved her, but the hatred in her eyes rooted me to the spot. So I walked off the stage, leaving the chaos behind, and the sound of cameras flashing and voices shouting, mixing with the distant crash of waves from Casco Bay. I had done what I came to do. I had exposed Nick Harrington. But as I stepped out into the crisp air, the truth weighed heavier than ever. I had saved my sister's future, but in the process, I might have lost her forever. In the days that followed, I became a pariah, not just in my family, but in the eyes of the public. Headlines painted me as the brother who stormed in and destroyed his sister's wedding. Investigative journalist Nathan Scott wrecks ceremony with shocking accusations. Some called me a hero, but most called me selfish, jealous, or cruel. My phone buzzed constantly, but never with the calls I wanted. Colleagues reached out, half curious, half afraid to be associated with me. Old friends sent awkward texts. "Are you okay? Did you really do that?" But from Brooke, nothing. From my parents, nothing. At the newsroom, I forced myself back into work, burying my pain under new investigations. But I could feel the eyes on me, the whispers when I walked past. "That's the guy who ruined his sister's wedding." I wasn't just a journalist anymore. I was a spectacle. And home wasn't any better. My mother ignored my messages. My father let my calls go straight to voicemail. Once, in desperation, I rang my Aunt Mary, hoping she might mediate. Her voice was icy. "Nathan, you embarrassed everyone. Your parents are in shock. Don't call again." That cut deeper than I expected. I'd always believed that, no matter what, family was family. That underneath the anger, there was love. But now it felt like that love had been ripped away, replaced with silence and shame. The hardest part, though, was Brooke. I tried calling her dozens of times. Each time the phone rang until it clicked into voicemail. Once I left a message. "Brooke, I'm sorry. I know you hate me, but I only wanted to protect you. Please, just talk to me." My voice cracked as I said the words, but the silence afterward was louder than any rejection. The online world wasn't kinder. Social media exploded with opinions. Strangers who knew nothing about me or my family left venomous comments. "He's a jealous loser. What kind of brother ruins a wedding like that?" Some even suggested I had feelings for Brooke, twisting my protective instincts into something grotesque. I stopped scrolling after a while, but the words lingered like poison in my mind. Through it all, only Aunt Teresa stayed by my side. She called every evening, checking on me, reminding me that I'd done the right thing. "The Harringtons won't recover from this," she assured me. "You struck a blow they can't hide. But Nathan, you need to be ready. They'll come after you." She was right. Within a week, I received a letter from Harrington Industries lawyers, threatening to sue me for defamation unless I retracted everything. I sat in my apartment holding that letter, the weight of it pressing on my chest. I wasn't rich. I didn't have the resources to fight a legal war against a dynasty like theirs, and yet I couldn't back down. I had proof. I had the truth. Still at night, when the city lights reflected off the Charles River and my apartment felt emptier than ever, I wondered if it was worth it. I'd saved Brooke from Nick, but at what cost? She hated me. My parents despised me. My extended family saw me as a traitor, and the world outside painted me as a monster. I thought about those days when Brooke was little, when she'd sneak into my room asking me to tell her stories. "Brother Nathan, you'll always protect me, right?" And I'd promised her I would. That promise had carried me through every fight, every sacrifice. But now, sitting in the dark, I asked myself a question I never thought I would. Did protecting her mean losing her forever? The fallout wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything I'd built my life on. Truth, integrity, family, all of it felt shattered. And as much as I told myself I'd done the right thing, the emptiness inside me whispered another question. If doing the right thing costs you everyone you love, was it really worth it? Months passed after the wedding, each day heavy with silence. My family had cut me out completely. Brooke still wouldn't answer my calls. My parents acted like I no longer existed. And though Aunt Teresa's support kept me afloat, I often felt like I was drifting alone, carrying the weight of a choice no one else understood. But the truth has a way of surfacing, slowly at first, then all at once. One morning, bleary-eyed and clutching a cup of black coffee, I opened the Wall Street Journal. The headline froze me mid-sip. "Harrington Industries files for bankruptcy. Heir Nick Harrington arrested for tax evasion, harassment allegations resurface." For a long moment, I just stared at the words. It felt surreal, like vindication wrapped in a nightmare. The article painted a devastating picture. Harrington Industries had been lying about profits for years. When investors fled, the debt consumed them. Their assets were stripped, factories shuttered, workers laid off, and Nick, the man my sister had once dreamed of marrying, was photographed in handcuffs, face pale and panicked, being led into a courthouse to face charges of tax evasion, fraud, and multiple accusations of EBA. Everything I had warned about was now public record. The lies, the fraud, the danger Nick posed. It was all exposed under the harsh light of truth. And yet, instead of relief, my heart ached. Because while the world now knew I had been right, my family's silence hadn't changed. Brooke hadn't called to say, "You were right, brother." My parents hadn't reached out with apologies. Vindication meant nothing when it couldn't mend the distance between us. Still, I couldn't ignore the sense of grim satisfaction as I scrolled through the coverage. Commentators who once mocked me now hailed me as a whistleblower. Some reporters even reached out, wanting interviews about how I uncovered the Harrington scandal. But I declined. This wasn't about the spotlight. It never had been. This was about Brooke, about keeping her safe from a man who would have destroyed her. Aunt Teresa called me the moment she saw the news. Her voice was full of pride. "Nathan, you saved her. Don't you see? If you hadn't spoken out, Brooke would have been tied to that monster. You may feel alone, but you changed the course of her life." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the memory of Brooke's face at the wedding, her eyes brimming with hate, her voice trembling as she told me I was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. That wound hadn't healed. Vindication couldn't erase it. In the weeks that followed, more details surfaced. Harrington Industries executives were indicted for fraud, investors filed lawsuits, employees came forward with stories of toxic working conditions, and more women accused Nick of harassment, their voices finally breaking through the wall of silence money had built around him. Each article felt like another confirmation of what I'd fought so hard to prove. But it also deepened the ache in my chest. I had been right all along, and yet I was still cast out. I began to wonder if truth really mattered when it came at such a cost. My career was intact, my reputation slowly recovering. But my family, my sister, they were still gone. Then, one quiet evening, I received a message from Aunt Teresa. They'll come around. Give it time. The truth always leaves a trail. Eventually, they'll see who you really are. I clung to those words like a lifeline, because the truth had finally destroyed Nick Harrington. But what I wanted more than anything was for the truth to rebuild what he had almost taken from me. My family, my sister, my place in their lives. Nearly a year had passed since that disastrous wedding. My life in Boston had slipped into a quiet rhythm. Long day in the newsroom, lonely nights staring at the Charles River, my phone stubbornly silent where Brooks' name should have appeared. The Harrington scandal had burned out of the headlines. Their empire collapsed, their fortune vanished, and Nick himself now sat in prison. But despite the vindication, the ache of estrangement lingered. I'd done everything to protect my sister, but I had lost her in the process. And some nights lying awake, I wondered if I'd made the wrong choice. If saving her had really been worth the price of her hatred. Then, one autumn afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Teresa. Her voice was calm, but I heard something different this time. Urgency. Nathan, you need to come back to Portland. The family needs you. My heart raced. For months, the words family and you had felt like they lived in separate worlds. But I didn't hesitate. I packed a bag, got in my car, and drove north along Interstate 95. Each mile pulling me back toward the people I'd both loved and lost. When I pulled into the driveway of our old wooden house, my chest tightened. My parents' car was there, Brooks' car too. For the first time in nearly a year, we were all under the same roof. Mom opened the door, her eyes red but soft. Without a word, she pulled me into a hug. Nathan, she has whispered, voice trembling, I'm sorry, I should have believed you. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and for the first time in months, I felt my own walls begin to crack. Dad appeared behind her, his face grave but no longer angry. Son, he said, his voice low, I was wrong. I accused you of tearing this family apart when you were the only one trying to protect it. You saw the truth when I refused to. I owe you an apology. Hearing those words, from the man who had always valued pride above all else, nearly brought me to my knees. I nodded, too choked up to speak. Then my eyes fell on Brooke. She sat quietly at the dining table, her hair pulled back, her expression weary. She looked older, not in years, but in spirit, as if the broken dream of that wedding had stolen some of her light. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she stood and walked toward me. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, Brother, I'm sorry. I hated you for what you did. I thought you wanted to destroy my happiness. But when I saw the news, when I realized who Nick really was, I knew you saved me. You kept your promise. Her words shattered the last of my defenses. I pulled her into my arms, holding her the way I had when she was little, and came running to me after scraping her knee. She sobbed against my chest, and I whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted you safe. I know, she choked out. And you were right. I didn't see it then. But I see it now. We stood there, brother and sister, mending what had been broken, while my parents watched with tears in their eyes. For the first time in so long, the weight pressing on my chest lifted. That evening, we sat around the dining table, No lavish feast, no apple pie, just simple cookies and coffee Mom had put together at the last minute. But it was warmer than any banquet I could remember. We talked about the past, about mistakes, about forgiveness. And though scars remained, I could feel the cracks in our family slowly beginning to heal. Before I left, I looked at them, my mom, my dad, my sister, and finally spoke the truth I had carried for so long. Love doesn't mean giving someone whatever they want. Sometimes it means saying the things they don't want to hear. Sometimes it means being hated for telling the truth, but that's love, too. They nodded quietly, and Brooke squeezed my hand, whispering, "You'll always be my knight, Brother Nathan, always." Driving back to Boston that night, the highway stretched out before me, golden leaves swirling in the headlights. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to smile. I had kept my promise. I had protected Brooke. And though the truth had come at a price, it had also given me back what mattered most: my family, my sister, and the hope that love, real love, can survive even the deepest wounds.